Great, so welcome to our second veterinary WebEx. These are held fortnightly and they're to address any recent guidance updates or changes to policy happening in the animal health and welfare space as a result of EU exit. We appreciate that this is another significant week in the EU exit process and will endeavour to keep business and sectors updated during this unprecedented time. I'm Christine Middlemas, I'm the UK Chief Veterinary Officer, so I'm hosting today's WebEx and I'm joined by our Policy Lead for Pet Travel and Anthony Ridge from APHA, our Technical Lead. So today's focus is pet travel. We've been communicating on the potential changes to this if we are in a no-deal scenario for some time now. And today we want to give you a refresh of the guidance and we're very happy to answer a few in-depth questions at the end. If you have a question, please do type it in the dialogue box as we go. We will also be happy to take questions to the email address after we've closed the WebEx, because we appreciate that there's quite a lot to think about and people may have questions as they go further. So I'm going to turn now to our policy lead, John Alsop, who will update you on the technical detail. You can follow this on the slide presentation. We're on slide 3 and John will talk you through it. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Christine. So while we remain a member of the European Union, pet animals, so that's cats, dogs and ferrets that meet the rules of the EU pet travel regulations, can travel from the UK to countries within the EU with EU pet passports. These rules will change if the UK leaves the EU without a deal and is treated as either an unlisted or listed third country. As Christine said, this has been in preparation for some time, and we've always wanted pet travel to continue with a minimum disruption after we leave the EU while maintaining high biosecurity and welfare standards. On 6th of November, DEFRA published guidance on pet travel to Europe after Brexit, which set out advice for owners planning to take their pet to the EU after the UK leaves the EU. And we advised owners to seek advice from their vet at least 4 months before they're intending to travel. When further information becomes available on this, it will be published and updated on gov.uk, and in that same place you can sign up for email alerts. Moving on to the day one UK entry requirements after we've left the EU. Actually, the UK pet health requirements won't change on day one. Pets will continue to be able to travel from EU member states, provided they've got up-to-date rabies vaccinations. And dogs will need treatment against Echinococcus multilocularis if they're travelling directly from a country which isn't free of that tapeworm. However, there will be changes to the documents required for entering the country, and that pets must have one of the following documents. They can use existing pet passports, whether they're issued in the EU or the UK prior to exit. They can use one of the new animal health certificates issued in the UK and used to travel to the EU. They can be valid for up to 4 months after they've been issued. And also, if they're coming from a non-EU third country, a UK pet health certificate. As now, pets will be required to enter Great Britain on an approved route using an approved carrier, and the pet's microchip and documents will continue to be checked before entry to the UK on ferry and rail routes, or if coming by air at the airport. Thinking about the sort of longer-term pet travel arrangements, our priorities include ensuring biosecurity and safeguarding the highest welfare standards, and we want to keep our technical evidence up to date, and we will keep our technical evidence up to date based regarding biosecurity and animal health risks. Alongside this, we want to continue to deliver the benefits that pet travel confers on travelling pet owners, and over time we'll consider the health, welfare and compliance impacts of various potential measures in line with those priorities, and this will obviously be carried out in close consultation with major stakeholders. Looking to the various EU exit scenarios, currently under the European Union Pet Travel Scheme, pet dogs, cats and ferrets can enter the European Union from any country in the world without quarantine, provided they meet the rules of the scheme. And the way they enter depends on the country they're arriving from listed status. If the UK leaves the EU without a deal, it would automatically become an unlisted third country and travel preparations would become more onerous. However, under EU Pet Travel Scheme rules, third countries can apply for listed status. Therefore, the UK faces the following potential scenarios depending on what category of third country it becomes after leaving the EU. Either an unlisted third country or a listed third country, be that Part 1 or Part 2 listed. So firstly, looking at the unlisted third country scenario. So this is the most onerous, and the requirements for entering the EU would mean that pet owners would need to prove that their animals are effectively vaccinated against rabies before they could move into EU countries, and they would require a blood titer test to demonstrate that they've got sufficient levels of rabies antibody, and that has to be carried out 30 days after the previous rabies vaccination. The vet who takes the blood sample would then need to send that sample to one of the EU-approved testing laboratories, and the results must show that there's a sufficient immune response to the vaccine. And then after the blood sample, after a successful blood sample, a 3-month wait from the date the blood was taken. Once that process has gone through, official vets would need to issue the pet with an animal health certificate within 10 days of the travel to the EU. This document would replace the current UK issued EU pet passports. The certificate would be valid for 4 months for onward travel within the EU, and a new certificate would be required for each trip from the UK to the EU. So we'll probably cover that in a bit more detail later. Arriving in the EU, pet owners travelling with their pets will be required to enter via a traveller's point of entry, and this is where they may be asked to provide proof of the animal's identity via microchip and details of rabies vaccination and successful blood test results, along with the animal health certificate, which I mentioned a few moments ago. Pet owners can look on individual member states' websites for guidance on arrangements for travellers' points of entry. For example, the Irish government have recently updated their no deal guidance, which outlines a requirement for pre-notification for travel between Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland. Also in an unlisted scenario, dogs travelling to Ireland, Finland or Malta will need a tapeworm treatment effective against Echinococcus multilocularis as before travel. Pets that have previously had a successful blood test and where the rabies vaccinations have been kept up to date don't need to repeat the blood tests, provided those blood tests were done to the requirements which I spoke about previously. Moving on to Part 1 listed third country. DEFRA has submitted an application to allow the UK to become a Part 1 listed third country under the pet travel regs, and we're seeking technical discussions with the European Commission, and we'll continue to press the Commission to discuss developments with us. It's now the Commission to consider our application for listed status following our departure from the EU. If we do become a Part 1 listed country, owners will still be able to travel to Europe with their dog, cat or ferret from no change in what they currently do in most cases for health preparations. However, for travel to Malta, Finland and Ireland, dogs would require the tapeworm treatment. There will be minor changes to documentation, with the current EU pet passport being replaced with a UK Part 1 pet passport, and that can be used in the same way as the current blue passports we're all familiar with from multiple trips until for the life of the animal or until it becomes full up. However, we're likely to be treated as an unlisted third country if we leave without a deal. Under Part 2 listed scenarios, there will be some new requirements, but they wouldn't be as burdensome as for unlisted status. So pets travelling from Part 2 listed countries to the EU have to have a rabies vaccination at least 21 days before entering the EU 27, but there's no requirement for an additional blood titer test to demonstrate the immune response or have that 3-month wait period. As in the unlisted scenario, official vets would need to issue the pet with a EU animal health certificate within 10 days of the travel to the EU, and that, as before, the document would replace UK-issued pet passport and be valid for 4 months for onward travel within the EU. Again, on arrival in the EU, pet owners travelling with a pet would be required to enter via a traveller's point of entry and be prepared to present the identity certificate and vaccination record of their pets. And as before, for travel to Ireland, Finland and Malta, dogs will require the echinococcus treatment. So moving on to key veterinary issues, animal health certificates and blood titer tests. First off, animal health certificates. After the UK leaves the EU, passports issued by UK official vets would no longer be valid, and instead a pet travelling to the EU from the UK would need an animal health certificate. If we're categorised as an unlisted third country when we leave the EU, you'll need to issue those animal health certificates instead of passports, and animal health certificates will only be valid when we leave the EU. So if there's an extension or a deal is agreed with an implementation period, we won't deem to have been left the EU, and so those certificates won't be valid at that point. I think previously mentioned, but the animal health certificates are valid for a single trip, unlike passports, and for up to 10 days after they've been issued for entry to the EU by an OV, and for 4 months onward travel within EU 27 countries, and for entry back to the UK 4 months after the date of issue by the UK OV. Animal health certificates have to be by EU regulation dual language in English and an official language of each member state. So we now have 22 different language versions. A pet needs a health certificate in one of the official languages of the member state which it's entering. So, for example, a pet entering the EU via France would need a dual language certificate in French and English. All animal health certificates are, except the English ones, are dual language, and those English ones are for entry to Republic of Ireland, Malta and Cyprus. OVs who are issuing animal health certificates are asked to keep a copy of each one they issue, and APHA, Centre for International Trade, may ask to review copies of any health certificates that they issue. All CASX qualified vets have been notified by email that animal health certificates are now available from APHA, and how to order. So to order, official vets must email a completed order form to APHA. As with any process, there have been a few bumps in the road. Common errors on the order form that APHA are receiving include that a postal address hasn't been provided, which isn't that helpful. That more than the maximum of 25 animal health certificates per order have been requested, and there's been a bit of confusion over the language requirements. And obviously this means it takes a bit more time to get resolved and to get those animal health certificates issued. So what we're asking vets to do is to get ready to start issuing animal health certificates instead of pet passports for travel to the EU 27 after the UK leaves the EU. Place an order for the animal health certificates they're likely to need and complete the order form, and familiarise themselves with the guidance for completing animal health certificates, which is available on the Vet Gateway, clicking through OV instructions, and that's detailed on screen.
So we're going to move over now to Anthony Ridge, who's going to take us through the blood teacher tests and the operational issues around those. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, so on the blood titer test, we have had some feedback, some examples where pets have failed to respond sufficiently to the rabies vaccination, and by sufficiently that is to meet a rabies antibody level of 0.5 IUs per milliliter. This can be due to very many factors to do with how the individual pet responds to the individual vaccine that it has been given. And in the literature, there is evidence that this can relate to the size of the animal, the age of the animal, as well as the breed. Certainly the sampling time, with a longer sampling time between vaccine and sampling, resulting in a tail off of antibody level. And the vaccine used, so different manufacturers of different vaccines tend to create a different response in the individual pet. So in occasions where pets do not satisfactorily meet the 0.5 international unit cutoff, the recommendation is for those pet owners to talk to their vet about maybe doing a booster vaccination or perhaps using a different rabies vaccine. The studies do show that over 90% of dogs that receive a booster vaccination do reach that cutoff, but there are some examples of pets that don't. The sampling interval is key because the neutralizing antibodies do wane quite rapidly after both primary and booster vaccines. And as I said, this differs for different vaccines and different animals. And there is comprehensive guidance covering rabies vaccine and testing available on the FAQ section of the Vet Gateway website, so please do encourage members to access this resource and check the guidance on this before they call the pet helpline.
So a lot of information in a short period of time there. We're now open to take some questions. So if people have any questions for the team, if you can put them in the chat box, we'll respond. The first one we have is, how many animal health certificates for pets are expected to be required? John, turning to you for that.
Well, quite a lot. Yes. We've made some estimates based on the number of pet passports that APHA issue, and that's about as far as we can go. We've done some modelling. We expect that the fact that issuing animal health certificates is a bit more onerous, so that might result in people choosing not to travel. So we've done some modelling. We're printing lots of animal health certificates, and we're confident we'll have sufficient. But I mean, it's in the public domain, but there's about 100,000 pet passports issued by APHA each year. So there will be a lot.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that update. Any other questions? If people have any questions, do type them in the chat box and we'll respond to them. I just wanted to note in the meantime, as John said, we have applied to be a Part 1 listed country, but we're working on the premise for the moment that in a no-deal scenario we will be an unlisted country, which, as we know from what John has just described, there's more preparation both in time and sampling and so required for people wishing to travel with their pets. And we think that people who wish to travel both spring and this summer should be considering now, because of the lag time, if they want to travel, and preparing their pets and themselves for that. We're still waiting any further questions. This WebEx is being recorded. It will be available later online for people to view again. So somebody else, Adrian, has asked, what advice is in place for the requirement to meet 21 days as opposed to 30-day period? Rabies vaccinations dependent on listed country status. I'll kick off and then I'll move to one of the team. So third country unlisted status, it's very clear it's a 30-day requirement for vaccination. In listed status it may differ, but we're preparing, because we do not know that we'll be listed, so we're preparing people for being unlisted, which is the most onerous requirements, and that's a 30-day period. Anthony, John, no, nothing else to add to that at the moment. Any further questions?
I'm on the phone. Can you hear me on the phone?
Yes, but we really need you to type them. I'm not sure everybody else can hear on the phone, so if you can type questions into the chat box, that'd be really helpful.
The problem is that on my WebEx, the presenter has disabled the chat function for attendees.
Ah.
So I can't, yeah, it says at the bottom of the...
Oh, yes, so people on the phone can hear, so if you want to go ahead with your question, then yes, we'll take it.
I mean, I'm John Chapman from Suffolk County Council Trading Standards, and I'm on the National Animal Health and Welfare Panel. The question I have is, if we have somebody export their animal under the current system and then bring it back under the current system, are you expecting local authorities to take a proactive enforcement approach? I.e., will they be breaching the rules regarding importation and exportation of cats and dogs? I.e., they won't wait us for 3 months.
So,
They get across, they may not get checked in some manner, and then they come back.
well, first of all, we need to be really careful about the language we're using, because you talked about exporting and importing, which in EU terminology is very specific to trade, so that's very specific to commercial movement of animals, not pets. And that's quite key when you read not just our guidance but wider guidance. The terminology around trade for the EU, exports and imports, are what third countries do for commercial purposes and may have customs requirements associated with them, whereas they then talk about the movement of pet animals, pet travel from there. We have...
Yeah.
Oh, John, do you want to, in terms of responding specifically?
So just on that particular point, John, that if an animal has come into the UK, meeting the requirements which you know about and which were on screen earlier, then the animal is compliant. So there are three documents that the animal can come in on. They can use an existing UK pet passport, even though it might not be recognised by the EU. It can use an animal health certificate, which we've been talking about, or it could, if it's coming in from a non-EU third country, an UK animal health certificate, or indeed a pet passport issued in the EU 27.
So our requirements in the interim are not changing at all for animals moving in. I'm right, we haven't got any...
I'm just trying to think what the expectation is, because in reality...
Well, I think it'd be more appropriate as one of our delivery partners for us to discuss this in a separate forum. The mission here today is to update people on the guidance on what they need to know to prepare owners to travel. And on that, we don't have any further questions at the moment. There is now a specific page in gov.uk for vets that has the up-to-date guidance on this and a whole variety of issues related to EU exit. So if you search for vets EU exit, that'll take you to the relevant pages. We'll be circulating this presentation and the audio to you as soon as possible, so you can disseminate it to your members and individuals who would like to know more. And as I said earlier, if you do have any additional questions, contact the stakeholder team on the email that's on the screen just now, and do let us know if there's any further questions and we can help you to prepare. As I said right back at the beginning, as we all are aware, there's another significant week in the EU process. There are changes as timelines and political decisions are made, and we will be endeavouring to keep everybody up to date on how that applies to pet travel and other wider issues. Thank you very much for your time and attendance today, and we'll be holding another of these in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.